You know how some houses look perfect from the street? White fence, polished porch, geraniums blooming in every window. But the moment you step inside, the air feels heavy, like the walls are holding their breath. That was my parents' house. It looked like comfort but never felt like it. I grew up learning early that love came with conditions. My mother was the type who smiled for church photos and then hissed criticism between her teeth when no one was looking. My father, silent and stern, measured respect by obedience. Their favorite sentence was, "Don't embarrass us." By 16, I was their maid in everything but name. Cooking, cleaning, ironing Dad's shirts before he went to work, helping Mom with her church committee dinners. When guests came over, she'd wave a hand toward me and say with that rehearsed laugh, "Oh, she just loves keeping busy." But I didn't love it. I loved art, drawing, design. The quiet magic of creating something beautiful out of blank paper. They called it a waste of time. "You're not going to make money coloring pictures," my father once said. His voice cold as glass. "Maybe focus on things that actually matter, like cleaning your room." And that was the beginning of a silent promise I made to myself. One day, I'd build a life so far from this house, they'd have to squint to recognize me. The scholarship that changed everything. When I got accepted to a design program at a state university, it felt like sunlight cracking through stone. I'd earned a partial scholarship. Not full, but enough to hope. My parents weren't proud. They were offended. Mom sat across from me at the table, arms crossed. "So, you want to go waste 4 years doodling and living in some dirty dorm? Who's paying for it?" "I got a scholarship," I said quietly. Her lips pressed thin. "Partial. Which means we'd still have to help." Dad didn't even look up from his paper. "No daughter of mine is throwing her life away on some art nonsense. You stay here, help your mother, and maybe take some business classes at the community college." I remember my throat closing up. Not just from disappointment, but from something sharper. That's when I realized. They didn't see me as a daughter. I was labor, useful, controllable, replaceable. So I did the unthinkable. Left, starting from nothing. The first year away from home was a patchwork of exhaustion and small victories. I worked nights at a diner, slept 4 hours a day, and studied design like my life depended on it, because it did. I learned to stretch $20 for a week, to draw logos on a borrowed laptop, to walk home in the rain because bus fare was a luxury. Every call from home was the same. "When are you coming back? Your mother's back hurts, she could use help around the house." Real jobs don't come from art degrees. I started letting their calls go to voicemail. It hurt. But the silence hurt less than the judgment. Chance meeting. By my senior year, I'd built a small portfolio. Not perfect, but uniquely mine. One afternoon, while serving coffee at the diner, a man came in wearing a perfectly tailored suit. The kind of man who looked like he lived above the clouds. He asked for black coffee, no sugar. When I set it down, he noticed the sketch pad beside the register. "You draw?" I nodded, embarrassed. "Just between shifts." He smiled, not politely but curiously. "Mind if I take a look?" I hesitated, then handed it over. He flipped through the pages slowly. Logos, packaging ideas, mock magazine covers. Small dreams on cheap paper. "This is good," he said finally. "Really good." I laughed nervously. "Tell that to my parents." His brow lifted. Parents rarely see what their kids are capable of until someone else does. He left a business card beside the check. Ethan Hale, founder, Hale Creative Group. I didn't know it then, but that moment would change everything. The offer. A month later, I got an email from Hale Creative. They'd reviewed my online portfolio and wanted me as a junior design assistant. It felt like someone had pulled me out of the mud and handed me a key to the sky. I moved to the city. Tiny apartment, 1 room, leaky pipes. But freedom has a sound, and it's quiet. Like peace breathing. Ethan Hale wasn't just a CEO. He was a visionary. The kind who remembered names, who looked you in the eye when you spoke. He became the mentor I never had. "You have instinct," he told me once after a presentation. "That's not something I can teach. Don't lose it trying to impress people who don't deserve it." His words sank deep. The return of the family. Years passed. Promotions came, one after another. By 29, I was creative director, designing campaigns that went viral, working with brands my parents could only dream of affording. That's when Mom called again. Her voice unusually bright. "Sweetheart, we're so proud of you. Everyone in church is talking about that ad you did for Hale Group. Your father says you've really made it." I knew that tone. It wasn't love. It was leverage. 2 weeks later, she called again. "We're having dinner next month. Big guests from our business circle. You have to come. They'd love to meet you." I hesitated. "Who are the guests?" She smiled through the phone. "A very important man, Mr. Ethan Hale. You must know him." Froze. Of course I knew him. He was my boss, my mentor. And apparently, the man my parents were desperate to impress. The dinner. The night of the dinner, their house looked exactly the same. The polished porch, the perfect lawn, the same suffocating air. But I was different. I wasn't the maid anymore. When I walked in, my mother hugged me like a politician. "All performance. You look so professional. See, your parents must have done something right." Ethan arrived not long after. My parents nearly tripped over themselves greeting him. "Mr. Hale. Such an honor. Our daughter talks about you all the time." He smiled politely. "Actually, she doesn't need to. Her work speaks louder than any introduction." Their eyes widened. He turned to me. "Ready for the presentation tomorrow, boss?" The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. My mother's smile cracked. My father blinked, confused. "Boss?" Ethan grinned. "Didn't she tell you? She's my creative director. Practically runs the department." Silence. Utter delicious silence. The tipping point. Dinner was awkward after that. My parents tried to recover, offering humble brags and fake modesty. But the air had shifted. Ethan was gracious but firm. He treated me as an equal, every word a subtle reminder of how far I'd come. After he left, my mother pulled me aside. "You could have told us you worked that closely with him." I smiled faintly. "You never asked." Dad frowned. "You embarrassed us, acting like you're above your own parents." Something in me snapped. "Above you?" I said softly. "No. I just finally stopped being beneath you." I walked out before they could respond. That was the night I stopped needing their approval. The next few years were a blur of work, sleepless nights, and quiet victories. While my parents were busy hosting dinner parties to impress their wealthy friends, I was taking night classes, teaching myself business strategies, and applying for internships nobody believed I could get. They thought I was just wasting time. But I had a plan. At 22, I landed an entry-level job at a growing marketing firm. It wasn't glamorous, coffee runs, spreadsheets, and being invisible in meetings, but I was learning. Every single day, I watched how the real players moved. How they spoke, how they negotiated, how they commanded respect. One of those people was Mr. Grant, the CEO. A man everyone admired. Calm, confident, and fair. He noticed how I stayed late every night, cleaning up presentations, fixing reports, and helping coworkers without ever being asked. One evening, as I was packing up, he walked over. "You're the only one here after 9 p.m. Don't you ever go home?" I smiled nervously. "Home's not really a place I like being, sir." He paused, studying me, then said something I'll never forget. "Then let's make your career your home." From that day, he became my mentor. He taught me how to lead, how to see opportunity where others saw risk, and how to trust myself. Years passed. Promotions came one after another. Eventually, when Mr. Grant retired, He called me into his office, the same office where I'd once served coffee. "I'm stepping down," he said, "and I want you to take over." I was stunned. "Me? Sir, there are people who've been here for decades." He smiled. "Exactly. People who've been here. You've been everywhere. You learned from everyone, helped everyone, and never once complained. You've earned this." When the official announcement was made, my parents didn't even call. Not congratulations. Not even a text. Hurt. Deep down, I still wanted them to be proud. But I also knew I didn't need their approval anymore. A few weeks later, fate handed me the moment I never saw coming. My company had just closed a massive deal, a merger with another firm that wanted to expand into the US market. We were hosting a formal dinner to finalize everything, and Mr. Grant insisted I attend as the new CEO. The other company's executives were flying in from out of town, along with a few VIP guests. When I walked into that elegant ballroom in my black suit, I felt powerful, confident. The soft buzz of conversation, the glint of crystal glasses, everything felt like a dream. But then across the room I froze. There they were, my parents, my mother in her favorite blue dress, my father chatting animatedly with guests, both glowing with fake charm. And beside them, the very people they had spent years trying to impress. Turns out, the important family friends they'd always boasted about were investors in the partner company. They didn't recognize me at first. Maybe because I didn't look like the daughter who used to scrub their floors. When the host announced, "Everyone, please welcome our new CEO, Ms. Elena Matthews," the room turned. Their faces, my parents' faces, went pale. My mother's glass slipped from her hand. My father's jaw literally dropped. I walked across the floor, calm and composed, shaking hands with the executives. When I reached my parents, I gave a small, polite smile. "Mom, Dad," my mother stuttered. "Elena, you're the CEO." "Yes," I said softly. "Of the company your friends are partnering with." The table went silent. And then, as if on cue, Mr. Grant appeared behind me, his hand on my shoulder. "Couldn't have done it without her," he said proudly. "She's the smartest woman I've ever had the pleasure to mentor." My parents' faces were a perfect portrait of disbelief, a mix of regret, shame, and silent awe. For years, they'd treated me like a servant in my own home. Now, the very man they admired was calling me boss. After the dinner, my mother approached me in the hallway, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell us?" I met her gaze, calm, steady, unshaken. "Would you have listened?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. There was nothing to say. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want an apology. All I wanted was peace. And as I walked out into the night, the city lights reflecting off the glass towers, I realized something beautiful. I hadn't lost a family. I had simply built a new one. A family of people who believed in me, respected me, and saw my worth from the very start. That night I finally went home. Not to my parents' house, but to the apartment I bought with my own hard work. I poured a glass of wine, looked out the window, and whispered to myself. They wanted a maid. I became a CEO. And for the first time in my life, felt free. That night I barely slept. Not because I was restless, but because I was content. For years, I dreamed of the moment they'd finally see me for who I'd become. And when it happened, I didn't feel the anger I expected. Only peace. But life wasn't done teaching me yet. The next morning my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. When I answered, I heard my father's voice. Hesitant, soft, almost foreign. "Elena, it's your dad." I stayed quiet. He sighed. "Your mother's not feeling well. The doctor says it's stress. She hasn't stopped crying since last night." I closed my eyes, the weight of old memories pressing on my chest. The endless chores, the shouting, the feeling of never being enough. Part of me wanted to hang up. But another part, the part that still cared, couldn't. "I'll stop by tomorrow," I said finally. The next day, I drove back to the house I swore I'd never visit again. It hadn't changed. The white fence, the perfect garden, the same curtains fluttering in the living room window. But walking through that front door felt like stepping into a memory I'd already outgrown. My mother sat on the couch, her eyes red, tissues piled beside her. She looked up when she saw me, her expression somewhere between shame and relief. "Elena," she whispered. "Hi, Mom." For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy, fragile, and thick with years of unspoken pain. Finally, she said, "We didn't know. We thought you were just wasting time. You never told us how hard you were working." I smiled faintly. "You never asked." Her lip trembled. "We just wanted what was best for you." I met her eyes. "No, you wanted what looked best to others." She flinched, not because I shouted, but because I said it calmly. The truth has a way of cutting deeper when it's quiet. Tears filled her eyes again. "We were wrong," she said softly. "We were so wrong." My father walked in then, slower than I remembered, his face carrying the weight of years and regret. "I treated you unfairly," he said, voice low. "You did everything for us, and we made you feel small. I'm sorry." For the first time in my life, I saw him not as the man who demanded perfection, but as someone broken by his own pride. I didn't forgive them right away. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a slow, steady climb. But that moment was the first step. Weeks passed. My relationship with them didn't suddenly turn perfect, but it began to heal. Cautiously, like a wound that finally gets air. My mother would call sometimes just to ask how my day went. My father started reading articles about leadership, saying, "Just trying to understand your world, kid." And one Sunday morning, they both showed up at my office. The same office where they once would have never imagined me sitting behind the desk. They stood there quietly as I finished a meeting. When I turned around, my mom smiled nervously. "Still feels strange," she said, "seeing you here." I laughed softly. "It feels strange being here sometimes." My dad glanced around, then looked at the nameplate on my desk. Elena Matthews, Chief Executive Officer. He took a deep breath. "You really did it. You proved us wrong." I shook my head. "I didn't do it to prove you wrong, Dad. I did it to prove me right." He nodded slowly, and for once he didn't argue. That night I drove home alone again. But this time, home didn't mean silence or pain. It meant peace, earned, not given. I opened my balcony doors, letting the cool night air drift in. The city below glowed with golden light, the same skyline I used to stare at as a kid, wondering what it would take to belong. Now I realized, I didn't just belong. I had built something of my own. I thought about every moment that led here. The scrubbing floors, the loneliness, the rejection, the nights of crying into my pillow. Every scar had turned into a map, one that led me exactly where I was meant to be. I lifted a glass of champagne and whispered, "To the maid they raised, and to the woman she became." Epilogue. 6 months later, the company had expanded internationally. We were featured in Forbes. Business was thriving. But one headline made me smile more than any award ever could. CEO who started as a family maid now leads billion-dollar empire. When I saw it, I didn't feel pride for the money or fame. I felt pride for the journey. Later that evening, we hosted a charity gala to raise funds for women who'd been underestimated or mistreated. Women like me. I watched them walk in, young, nervous, full of potential. I took the stage and said, "Your worth isn't decided by the people who overlook you. It's defined by what you build when no one believes in you." The applause echoed through the hall. Somewhere in the front row, I saw my parents sitting together. My mom wiping her eyes, my dad clapping hard. His face beaming with something I'd waited my whole life to see. Pride. Real pride. And in that moment I realized something powerful. Revenge might taste sweet, but forgiveness with success tastes divine. There's a moment in every storm when the rain finally stops. When you realize the thunder that once terrified you was only teaching you how to stand taller. Elena learned that lesson the hardest way possible. She spent years living under her parents' roof. Invisible, unappreciated, treated like a maid in her own home. But life has a strange way of rewarding those who never give up. Because while they were doubting her, she was building something. While they dismissed her dreams, she was quietly crafting an empire. And when they finally looked up, she was already sitting at the head of the table. There's a kind of power in silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of victory. When you don't need to shout, don't need to prove, don't need to explain. Because the truth speaks for itself. That's what Elena discovered the day the CEO, the man her parents once worshipped, stood beside her and called her boss. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about respect, earned, not demanded. And maybe that's the real beauty of her story. Not that she made them regret how they treated her, but that she found peace in the one place they never thought she would, within herself. She learned that sometimes, the sweetest justice isn't served cold. It's served quietly, in boardrooms, on magazine covers, and in the stillness of a woman who knows her worth. So if anyone ever makes you feel small, remember Elena's story. Because the ones who once looked down on you might someday have to look up to you. If this story gave you chills or made you think of someone who once doubted you, hit that like button, share this story with a friend, and tell me in the comments, what's your version of success as revenge? And of course, subscribe for more real-life stories where karma hits just right, and where silence turns into strength. Briefcase, never underestimate the quiet ones. They're usually busy building their empire.